Hey guys, Paul 80 here from Cyber 80. Just wanted to talk a little bit about a free tool that I'm releasing, which is an email forensic investigation tool called M365BOSS. This is forensic software that you would use for a business email compromise investigation, BEC, or perhaps in an account takeover, and focuses specifically on Microsoft 365. Now there are a couple other free tools out there for Microsoft 365 and one paid tool. And the reason why I made my tool is because these other tools tend to not work very reliably. And I think part of the reason is because they use a global reader to authenticate. And although that's probably the most forensically sound method, global reader just tends to not play nicely with Windows PowerShell. In addition, these tools also primarily focus on the unified audit log, and there's a bunch of other logs that they tend to not collect. So that's why I created my tool, which is a reliable tool and also gives you more data and more logging. Now you can run this tool on your Windows host or, as I do, in a virtual machine, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. Okay, so we are inside my virtual machine, and the first thing that you're going to want to do, whether you're doing this on your host or in a VM, is go to my website, which is cyber80.com. Cyber80.com is my forensic company, and it's a forensic company that specializes primarily in cloud forensics and incident response. We're talking about AWS, Azure, Windows 365, Microsoft 365, BECs, etc. Okay, so once you get there, go to Free Tools, click on Free Tools, and then you'll see M365BOSS in the download link. Make sure you come back to my free tools section because I'm going to have additional forensic tools for free on here, and also any updates for M365BOSS in the near future. So click on download link, and that's going to take you to my GitHub page. Now the quickest way to download it is just go to code and download zip. And that's going to go ahead and drop it in your downloads folder. So let me go ahead and grab that. So downloads, and it's called M365 main.zip. I'm just going to put that on my desktop right there. So we'll take the M365BOSS main.zip, we'll unzip it. I'm going to use 7-zip, and you can use whatever unzipping software you want. And we'll just extract it here. Let me trash the zip folder. Okay, so now let's open this folder up. And in here, we've got a README, which is basically information that was on the GitHub page. In order to run M365BOSS, if my cursor seems a bit high, it's due to just the anomaly between the screen recording software that I'm using and then running it in a virtual machine. But you're going to go ahead and right-click on the PowerShell script and run with PowerShell. So it's going to ask for a case folder name, and we'll say Cyber 80. Now, if before you get to this point, if it asks you for a permission error, you're going to say yes to all. That's going to give you an unrestricted PowerShell prompt here. You may or may not be running unrestricted, but we need to have an unrestricted PowerShell prompt. So if it asks you to make it unrestricted, say yes. And we'll see that in just a moment here. Okay. So I've created now a folder called Cyber 80. It's an empty folder. If you had trouble running this by going right-click, run with PowerShell, I'm going to show you an alternate way to run this program. We'll close this out. I'll delete this folder. Now you could also go to your Start menu and then type in PowerShell and then run as administrator. It'll give you a prompt down here. We'll say yes. And now we've got an admin PowerShell prompt. Now, one thing we're going to want to do, well, two things. Let's go ahead and navigate to where our tool is at. So I'm just going to use CD, change directory, and I'm going to put the path. On my desktops, and then M365. Okay, if I do a dir, you can see my tool right here. Now, if I run that tool, depending on your permissions, it may or may not work. So your execution policy actually. So let's do this. I'm just going to go ahead and say set -execution policy. That's all one word, unrestricted. So set -execution policy unrestricted. Set -execution policy, all one word, unrestricted. And it's going to say, let's say A for yes to all to put this in unrestricted mode. All right, so we're good. I'm going to clear the screen. And now we can just run our tool again by just saying M365BOSS.ps1. And it'll ask us for our case folder name again. So I'm going to say Cyber80. Remember, this will create an empty case folder so we can organize all of our data. Okay, so here's our menu right now. Looks kind of simple, but don't let it fool you because I got a little bit of horsepower under the hood on this baby here. So option 1 is just a README, but the main takeaways from the README are make sure you run step number 2 and make sure you use a global admin for authenticating. Remember, we're not using global reader because those tend to not work very well with PowerShell. Now, you could use the GUI to collect your data, but the GUI kind of throttles you back and gives you like, I think, 100 or 150 lines of data. And so PowerShell will give you a maximum of 5,000 lines of data for your unified audit log. Well, some users may exceed that. And we'll see in just a moment here how we can defeat that. Okay, so I'm going to go step number 2, which is going to install our modules and authenticate. There's 3 different steps you have to do for the installation of the modules. I used to do these manually. They got kind of time consuming and repetitive, so I just kind of automated all of this right here. So this will install your modules, and if it fails, it'll go ahead and reinstall them until they're installed correctly. So it's basically reaching out to the back end of Microsoft Azure servers, and it's making sure that it has the appropriate modules to connect to them, and then we're going to authenticate in just a moment with a global administrator account. So we're installing the first module right here. It's going to install another one after that. It's just taking just a moment here. We'll just let it run. So we're installing our second module right here, and then it's going to go ahead and finish them off here. Usually it's a bit quicker than this, but it may just be because I'm running it on the VM here. Yeah. Okay, it's importing it, and this allows, okay, now we get to the global admin, so make sure you have a global administrator email. So it's going to go ahead and ask you for your password. So we'll go ahead and put our password in here. And if you have MFA enabled, either through SMS or I'm using the authenticator here, you're going to want to go ahead and authenticate. Okay. And then give it just a second right here, and then it'll finalize the authentication in a moment down here. Okay, authentication successful, press any key to continue. All right, so now let's jump to the unified audit log. This is probably 80% of your data that you want right here. So we'll hit step number 3. We're going to put in our start date. Now, unified audit log is typically 90 days long. The maximum would be 365 days, and that's for the E5 license, the enterprise license. But just about everybody else, in all the investigations that I've done, everyone has some type of business license that gives you 90 days of logging. So we're going to go back. You would typically do 90 days. I'm just going to do 30 days just to speed up the process here. So I'm going to say 2023. Let's go back to May. Let's say May 1st. Oops. I'll say May 1st to June 1st, just to make it go quicker. You'll put in the email user that you want to get the unified audit log from. And we'll give it a name. I'm just going to call it Paul _ UAL. We'll name it as CSV as a file extension. And we'll hit enter. Okay, so if we look in our, well, that's collecting the data. When we look in our Cyber 80 folder, we now have a UAL folder. So I've got folders that kind of, organize everything nice and neat. And we can see right here that it's now collecting data. If you have 0 kilobytes of data, like it takes a couple minutes and says there's 0 kilobytes, well, a couple things. Either go ahead and run it again because the Microsoft server is just not responding, or perhaps unified audit logs are not turned on. And I see that in maybe 1 out of 10 cases. And I'll show you a step to check that in just a moment here. So this is collecting data right here. It's got 208 kilobytes. You're going to have much more, with heavy users, if you're doing it for 3 months. So I've hashed everything. Everything gets hashed in a SHA-256. So here's our SHA-256 for that file, specifically right there. So if you had to go to court, you could say that everything's been hashed, or if you had to give it to the defense as for discovery. And here's my unified audit log. Now, this is not an analysis course, but let me just talk briefly about the analysis. So you can look at this unified audit log in, like Microsoft Excel if you wanted to, or if you don't have that, you can use Eric Zimmerman's free tool, Timeline Explorer, which actually has excellent filtering properties. Let's go ahead and pull that up here. And it's a free tool that he offers. So I'm just going to dump this into Timeline Explorer. Give it just a moment to populate. And you can see right here, it'll give us our record type for data. The creation date, which is quite important here. We got basically May 1st to June 1st. Here's all of our log data. You've got your user ID. We just got one user, that was Paul at Cyber 80. And here's your operations, which are quite important. Now, typically you want to start with looking at who logged in, user logged in. So we can just filter these. Click up at the top, say equals, and we can just go user logged in. And that's going to give it just user logged in information. Now, we get to the next field right here, and that is called audit data. And Microsoft just dumps everything into this column right here, which can make it, very, very difficult to filter because it's in a column. But one way that you can look at the IP addresses, which is what you're going to want to focus on, you can just scroll over, and they're pretty much all in the same area right here. You got your IPv4, IPv6s. these are all your IPs that authenticated on those specific dates and times. So here's our dates and times right here. So you could just, if you thought, for example, that a specific IP was malicious, let's say you thought that this 73.138 was malicious, you could just go ahead and copy that and then use whatever website or program you wanted to resolve IP addresses right there. So like I say, this is not an analysis course, but just a quick little way to show you how to do the analysis right here. And then once you find a malicious IP that logged in, then you can go back here, you can uncheck the logins. And then you can just go back to take a look at everything. So, what did that IP address do? Did they set a mailbox? Did they look at file? Did they preview files? Did they download any files? So you can do a lot of investigation after you find a malicious IP. This is a great tool right here, your Zimmerman's tool to do your analysis. Like I say, this is not an analysis course. I can do a video in the future if people want it, but just wanted to show that. Okay. So you can collect all the users that you want. Typically you're going to have probably 3 or 4 specific email users that are involved in a business email compromise. Not the entire organization, but there's typically a few that you're going to want to look at. Okay, number 4 is quite important. This is one that all the other free tools and paid tools kind of ignore. That's the set admin audit log configuration. We hit number 4, hit enter. And that's going to go ahead and capture that. Let's take a look at that quickly. So it's under the folder admin audit log config. It's been hashed as well. Let's take a look at the configuration. And so the important things here are your log limit. This is 90 days of logging. Is the unified audit log enabled? That's true. So that means yes, you do have logs. If this is false, then logs are not turned on. You can turn logs on, but it's not going to go backwards in time. It's just going to start recording, forward with the logging. Here's when the date that the unified audit log was turned on. And this is quite important here too, is when changed. And this is when any major change was made to the audit log configuration. And in this case, so let's say my business email compromise occurred on, let's say, January 19th of 2023. Well, in this case, the logs were changed on January, the day before, January 18th. That would be a good indication that perhaps an attacker modified the logs, perhaps turned audit logging off, or did something else. So this is a good log entry to look at, which is overlooked by a lot of the other tools. Okay. Okay, we get to the forwarding rules, number 5. These used to be really important a couple of years ago, but Microsoft went ahead and kind of took the power away from the users and made it, the admins can only do forwarding rules now, but I still collect them. So forwarding rules would look like this. You're going to have your users right here, and then any forwarding rule, i.e., forward your whole inbox to badguy@gmail.com would be under here. I don't have any rules set up, but they would be right here. So in this case, in this example, there are no forwarding rules, and that's typically kind of what you're going to see. Or people may be forwarding within their organization, within their domain, to other users. Okay. The email rules, number 6, are quite important. See these a lot. We got 6. Now these are specific to each email user, so I'm just going to put in a specific email user here, Paul@Cyber80. And you have to do this for each user that you're investigating. This is now going to create a folder called email rules, and to look at the rules, you just click on it, and you're going to see, malicious stuff is going to look like something similar to this. Maybe a name called wire transfer, and the message is going to say, if there's any specific words in the subject, like wire transfer, then go ahead and move that email to the RSS feeds folder or some random folder that you would never ever look at normally. So that's a typical looking, bad guy email rule that you'll see. You see that as kind of a dead giveaway. Anything in the RSS feeds is like, I've never found any legitimate reason. I guess there probably is, but in my line of work, once I see that, it kind of sets off sirens. Anything in RSS feeds or conversation history, sometimes even into the deleted box, depending on what it is. Okay. So that's my free tool right there. Gives you a fair amount of, let me also mention this too. So Unified Audit Logs, it caps you at 5,000 lines of data using the PowerShell. So what I did is I used to collect it in chunks, like 1 month chunk per user for a total of 3 months. It became kind of tedious. So what I did is I said, in my PowerShell command, I wrote, go ahead and capture day number 1, write that to a text file, then capture day number 2 and append that to the same text file, day number 3 append it, etc. So you really never reach that 5,000 limit, per day. And so that lets you, you get, 13, 14, 15,000 entries here without any problem. And it keeps it in one unified audit log, which may sound, simple and boring, but it's quite important. So anyway, that's the free tool. Hope you like it. Give me any comments in the comment section, or you can send them to my GitHub page as well too if you want, and I'll make any updates as things go along. But thank you for watching.